Welcome to Wednesday, August 16th, 2023, your Day Weather Podcast brought to you by Cowboy State Daily. Well, the warm-up continues. Temperatures are going to be very warm across the high plains and the Rockies. Temperatures will be getting into the middle to upper 90s in many areas as heat building as high pressure is expanding and growing back into the region. So it's going to be quite warm. The thunderstorms that are going to develop are mainly going to want to be in the Great Basin on the western slopes of Colorado where there's moisture. It's not deep, so even there, the thunderstorms are going to be spotty. And that's kind of how it's going to go for today, probably for tomorrow, and a good part of Friday. But as we get on into late Friday and into the weekend and early next week, we're going to start to see what we talked about yesterday, this eastern Pacific tropical storm and hurricane activity start to throw more moisture into the western United States, and then what looks like at least the potential for significant rains coming into parts of the western United States will be happening late this weekend and next week. But have to warn you, exactly where the focal point of the heavier rain is going to be tricky. It is always tricky in these tropical situations. So we have to kind of take it slow. We'll show you what we have data-wise. As we get closer, obviously, we'll have a better idea. But impacts certainly look to be coming, as we've got a big, in fact, it's just a giant high pressure ridge that's going to develop over the nation's midsection by the weekend and next week. And that's going to be really directing the show in terms of where everything ends up going. And just the slightest subtle changes in the structure and placement of this high pressure ridge could direct or deflect that tropical activity in the eastern Pacific. A look at the infrared satellite photo this morning shows very, very quiet weather conditions across the west. We've got some thunderstorms here in Mexico, a dying thunderstorm in central Arizona, but for the most part, there's a real lack of clouds as high pressure is building over the west. Now, here's your water vapor image. It looks a lot like yesterday. We got this ring of dryness going through the area with moisture pushing up underneath the high. And this gray area here is where we're going to have those afternoon and evening widely scattered showers and thunderstorms today and tomorrow. Those orange areas, very little will be happening weather-wise. There's the high that's building across the west. But the placement of this high and all of those things are going to be changed going forward. And this is going to lead to warmer weather. So here's your temperature anomaly for today. You can see the darker red eastern side of the divide there along the front range. The coolness in the Midwest and parts of the nation's midsection, very warm relative to average. The Pacific Northwest going down the California coast and into Arizona and northwest Mexico. Thunderstorms, well, here's your general thunderstorm coverage today. Any strong or severe weather will be along the East Coast, just garden variety thunderstorms in the light green. Here's the temperature anomaly for tomorrow. There's actually another Canadian push of cool air in the upper plains and into the Great Lakes. And you can see some of that coolness does push a little bit more west. So what'll happen is today gets hotter. There's actually going to be a slight pullback in temperature in some areas on Thursday, except up here, of course, and down here. But right near the divide, maybe temperatures a little bit cooler. And here's your thunderstorm coverage for tomorrow. Again, pretty innocuous, pretty garden variety across the west. Then for Friday, the heat comes back in as this coolness in the Great Lakes heads towards the northeast, and we get a little bit of a downsloping effect coming on in. So it's going to be pretty warm is the bottom line here over the next 3 days. And there's your thunderstorm coverage on Friday. Now notice on Friday the thunderstorms are pushing further north and pushing further east. Again, nothing severe, but we'll start to see thunderstorms become a little bit more of a factor. Now, as we go into the weekend and early next week, there's the big high, really setting up and becoming quite strong in the nation's midsection. And the disturbance that we've been talking about that'll turn into a tropical storm, and then all indications suggest it's going to be Tropical Storm Hillary. That's next on the name list there in the eastern Pacific. And all indications suggest it will become Hurricane Hillary. And the setup, as we showed you yesterday, clockwise circulation around the high, the counterclockwise circulation around this trough coming on in. And when you get these systems in between the two, you're going to get a natural push of this hurricane, or what's left of this hurricane, northward towards this low and in between the high and the low. Lows attract lows in these tropical situations. So where this trough ends up is going to be important, and where this high exactly gets centered is going to be important. So I'm cautioning you that you're going to already, this is getting into the news, but where exactly the heaviest rain threat, we don't know yet. Got to kind of get a little bit closer, but it's going to be somewhere in the western United States for sure, but it could be a little further west and a little bit further east. So this is for Saturday. This is for Monday. The high bulges and is very impressive in the nation's midsection. And then you can see here, you can see as it comes on up and builds northward, then what's left of Hillary is going right up the Baja towards Southern California. But if the high is a little more east, Hillary will be a little more east, vice versa. If this goes a little more west, then Hillary goes a little more west. So there's steering mechanisms in these situations that are very, very, well, they're touchy. They're very, very sensitive. Nonetheless, we have a pattern historically that we're seeing on the weather charts that has led to this pattern before. So let's look at an animation of air pressure anomalies. So basically, this is just a really good way to show you where the hurricane is being forecasted by the European model as it forms off the west coast of Mexico, then goes right up west to Baja there, and then it goes right into California. Now, we could see this deviate west. We could see this deviate east. Sometimes we have seen this happen before, and this is why I'm always a little bit cautious. After doing this for a while, you'll tend to see the models wanting to do this, but they end up going out here. And that is always going to be a possibility. So that's why we're going to watch this carefully and make sure it doesn't take that hook. If it doesn't take that hook west, well, then things are going to get very interesting late this weekend and into early next week. Now, before anybody says this has never happened before, there's no such thing as hurricanes reaching California or what's left of hurricanes and tropical storms, because it won't be a hurricane by the time it gets to California. But there is a long historical record going way back of the number of storms that you can see going back to the pre-30s and then throughout the decades. Since then, they happen. And look when they happen historically. This is when they're going to happen. August, September, into early October. And that makes sense because that's the tropical season in the Eastern Pacific. So this has happened before. It goes back a long ways. And this moisture flow coming on in could be very, very impressive. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to step you through 4 different models that are trying to predict where everything's going to go. And we'll just show you the differences between them, because some of the differences are subtle. Some of them are very impressive in terms of being different in terms of where things are going. One screaming message, though, is the nation's midsection here. This is a forecast for the next 7 days. So the high is going to be here. So it looks like a big donut hole in the nation's midsection because there's not going to be anything going on with that high pressure ridge. So here's the European model. Then, of course, you can really see the red here of the heavy rains in the European model going all the way up here through California, Arizona, Nevada, parts of Utah, all the way into the eastern side of the Pacific Northwest, before the moisture also goes up into southern Canada here around the high. So that's the European model. This is the Canadian model. Notice that there is a little bit of a more eastern push of where the heavy moisture is. So European, Canadian. Here's the American GFS model, kind of in between the Canadian and the European. Look at that, rain in California. Then this is the ICON model that comes out of Germany, which is much further east with the axis of heavier moisture. And I will tell you that every one of these solutions is possible, or a hybrid of these solutions, or that hurricane could curve out into the Pacific. But this is what we're watching. So the exact placement, what I'm cautioning you is, if you're, let's say you're watching in California and you go, oh my gosh, here it comes. Well, if the ICON model is correct, California, not so much. So we've got to be careful and not going too far with too much detail here at the moment. Also notice a lot of the models are showing activity in the Gulf. We kind of hinted at this yesterday. There may be something brewing in the Gulf of Mexico next week as well. And at the Atlantic is also getting going, and there's that potential for the Gulf of Mexico. So things are going to be heating up in the tropics. Have yourself a good Thursday, well, a good Wednesday. We'll see you tomorrow, which is a Thursday.